Everyone knows The Lord of the Rings feels like it could have been born in the Viking Age. The towering wind-scorched mountains, the long, rough roads into darkness, the heroic courage that stands in the face of insurmountable odds. So, it's natural to assume Tolkien studied Norse mythology, admired it, and copied pieces of it. Lifted it maybe, reskinned it, dropped it into Middle-earth with new names and better maps. On the surface, that assumption makes sense. Because when you spend enough time with the text like Tolkien did, with the Norse texts of old, when you've lived inside of it, wrestled with it, listened to its rhythms, it doesn't stay on the page. It seeps into you. Language does that. Stories do that. They begin to shape how you imagine courage, how you frame death, how you tell the truth, even when you don't mean to. Tolkien spent a lifetime submerged in the literature of the North. So yes, Norse influence pours out of Middle-earth, not because Tolkien was trying to imitate it, but because it had become part of his creative bloodstream. Before he was ever a fantasy writer, Tolkien was something else entirely. A philologist, a hunter of words, a lover of words. A man who treated language the way archaeologists treat ruins, slowly, patiently, brushing away centuries of dust to see what still stood. Fantasy came later. First came languages. Old English, Old Norse, Gothic. These weren't academic checkboxes for Tolkien. They were worlds with gravity, and each one pulled him in. Tolkien didn't read Beowulf as a story. He lived inside of it as a cultural dig site, uncovering truth and clues while listening for what they feared, what they honored, and what they believed about death. And when he turned to Norse mythology, he didn't skim summaries or borrow a feeling. He read the Poetic Edda in the original tongue. The unpolished North, the brutal honesty, the unsentimental acceptance of loss. He knew the myths from the inside out, which is precisely why he didn't romanticize them, because Tolkien saw something many modern readers miss. Norse mythology is stunning, heroic, and unflinching about suffering, but it's also fractured. Its gods are powerful, but not always good. Its heroes are brave, but they all seem to be doomed. Its universe is grand, but has a terminal illness waiting to be resolved. And Tolkien felt that structure deeply. He once described the old myths as a glimpse, flashes of truth seen through broken glass. They point towards something real, something profound, but they never quite finish the sentence. And that unresolved tension between beauty and brokenness is the engine beneath everything Tolkien writes. Middle-earth is not the result of a man copying Viking myth. It is what happens when someone who knows the North better than almost anyone allows its stories to overflow and then dares to ask a dangerous question. What if the Vikings were right about the darkness, but wrong about the ending? What if courage was on the right track, but fate was more than just pre-written outcomes? So now that we understand the North does run deep in Tolkien, the real journey can begin. In this episode, we're not just going to point out Viking Easter eggs and surface-level parallels. We're going to walk the road between worlds. We're going to compare the great themes side by side, where Tolkien follows the North closely and where he reshapes it, and where he deliberately steps away. We'll trace the direct influences, the echoes of Norse mythology that ring loudly in Middle-earth, and we'll uncover the indirect ones, the ideas that pass through language, poetry, and long memory before emerging in a different form. But we're going to be honest, there will be moments where Tolkien refuses the North, when he turns from its conclusions, where he reaches beyond it, drawing from older, deeper traditions that offer answers the sagas never could. Those moments matter because they reveal not just what Tolkien borrowed, but what he believed. And as we move through these comparisons one by one, you may find yourself doing something unexpected, not just recognizing the past beneath Middle-earth, but noticing the places where Tolkien was quietly pointing towards something more. That's where the story gets really interesting. So at first glance, our first comparison, it feels almost too easy. But worlds are moving towards an end. The sky darkens, ancient powers stir, everything good feels fragile, temporary, already half lost. It feels a lot like Ragnarok. In Tolkien, he wants it to. In Norse myth, the end of the world, it's not a theory, it's a warning. And it's not a possibility, it's a certainty. The gods know it, the heroes know it, even the monsters of the north know it. Odin rides towards Fenrir fully aware of how the story ends. Thor kills the world serpent, then takes 9 steps before he dies. The point is not survival, the point is defiance. To stand when something is meaningless, to fight when fighting can't save you, to die well in a universe that rewards bravery. That worldview saturates the North, and it can be seen in Middle-earth too. When you first watch Lord of the Rings, it feels familiar. The odds are absurd. The enemy is overwhelming. Every council ends with the same unspoken truth. This battle cannot be won. Even the dialogue echoes it. There's no hope. There never was much hope. Tolkien deliberately walks this same road, but then, quietly, almost imperceptibly, he does something different. He doesn't remove the darkness. He doesn't soften the cost. He doesn't promise survival. Instead, he pivots and changes what the war is moving toward. In Middle-earth, the conflict is not rushing towards inevitable doom. It's moving towards a decision. Hope doesn't vanish. It recedes. It becomes small, unimpressive. And it's carried by weak people that the Norse would have had no confidence in. A hobbit. This is where strength and weakness become at odds and where the two paths diverge. So yes, we see some similarities, but it is clear Tolkien has taken a slightly different route. In Norse myth, bravery exists because defeat is inevitable, fate is sealed, which stands in stark contrast to Tolkien's world, where bravery exists because the outcome is unwritten and hope is what moves the heroes forward. Victory is possible, but not guaranteed, not without cost. Viking lore tends to have a fatalistic outlook. The Norns, the Valkyries, and Freya all have different roles in the death of the Norse heroes and those who die in battle. Every time a character in Tolkien's world says there's still hope, they're echoing something the Vikings would never be able to say, at least not out loud. The Battle of the Ring is not Ragnarok, not completely, but there are certainly undertones. Tolkien follows the North all the way to the edge, but then he refuses to accept that the fire gets the final word. So the darkness is the same, the courage is the same, but a different question is driving the story forward. And once you notice that shift, you'll begin to see it everywhere. The question for you is, which side do you lean towards? Fate? Is it sealed? Or has it been written yet? I love how knowing both Norse lore and Tolkien's mindset, let us ponder that question. And if you have an opinion about that, please share it in the comments. Now that we've opened the door with common ground and differences, a clear difference, if we peer past the threshold, we're going to see 2 figures standing there waiting. One from the north and one from Middle-earth. Odin and Gandalf. At first glance, this also feels like it could be straight lifted from Norse mythology. A wandering old man, a weathered cloak, a staff worn smooth by long roads, arriving at unexpected moments, carrying authority that doesn't come from rank or armies, but from wisdom very few possess. Both move through the world as outsiders. Both are guides to heroes without ruling them. Both seem bound to a story larger than themselves. If you know the North the way Tolkien did, you don't just see the connection, you feel it. And Tolkien wanted you to feel it. Odin is not a distant throned god. He is a walker of roads, a god who enters the world in disguise. And for much of Gandalf's presence in the story, he feels like he belongs to that same tradition, ancient, weathered, carrying secrets, bearing scars the story hasn't yet explained. Now, Tolkien does something subtle, because this parallel is going to break down, but it doesn't break down immediately. He lets it carry you. But if you consider that Odin seeks knowledge, wisdom, and poetry at any cost, you realize this is a different type of hero. Gandalf is offered the ring, offered absolute power, offered the very thing that Odin would have never refused. And Gandalf, he didn't accept it. But it's not because he lacks ambition, not because he doubts his ability, but because he understands the danger of using power, even if it's for the greater good. So while the connection can be felt, Tolkien slips past some major differences. Gandalf sacrifices himself to protect the weak. Odin, according to the sagas, sacrifices himself by hanging on the tree for 9 days, but the sacrifice, it was for himself. Odin loses an eye to gain wisdom. Gandalf lost his life so friends could move forward and live. Odin's sacrifice was for knowledge. Gandalf's was for others. This becomes a bit of an anti-parallel rather than a direct connection. But don't worry, there's still major parallels coming. Tolkien has a close relationship with the North, and it's going to show. If there's one place where Tolkien's debt to the North is unmistakable, it's here. The ring. This is anything but subtle. A ring forged with brilliance, desired beyond reason, passed from hand to hand, leaving devastation in its wake. This isn't a vague parallel. This is the same story, echoing across centuries. If you've listened to our episode on Andvari's ring, you already know the pattern. The ring, it's beautiful. The ring is coveted. The ring is cursed. Kings fall because of it. Brothers turn on one another. Bloodlines collapse. Not because the bearers are weak. Not because the doom is baked into the gold itself. No. In Norse myth, the ring is poisoned from the moment it exists. Once you possess it, the outcome is sealed. The ring is fate in metal form. No amount of wisdom can save you. No amount of virtue can protect you. The tragedy is not earned. It's inherited. Now pause and look at Tolkien's ring. The language is the same. The gravity is the same. The slow destruction of everyone who touches it feels identical. This is not coincidence. Tolkien is absolutely drawing from the North here, deliberately, deeply, unapologetically. For a long stretch of the story, the One Ring behaves exactly like Andvari's ring. It isolates. It corrodes relationships. It leaves ruin in its wakes. You are meant to recognize it. You are meant to feel the inevitability. Both stories place the responsibility of the curse or the destructive nature of the ring on the owner. Both rings reveal the weakness itself isn't the ring, it's the possessor of it. Tolkien shows that no one is above the ring and that all who possess it become corrupted. The Norse tell us it's the corruption of man, his lust, his greed, his longing for power that make a madman do anything to obtain power. In both cases, it's human weakness that is exposed. In the end, the ring will destroy you if you don't do something about it. The Norse knew Andvari's ring was cursed, and they tried to deal with it, but their solution was limited by fate. You pass the ring on, you give it away. You kill for it, or you are killed for it. The curse moves, but it never ends. In a world ruled by fate, the problem is never solved, it's only transferred. Tolkien didn't abandon the Norse curse, he answered it. And he says the only solution for this ring is for it to be unmade. In Norse myth, tragedy happens to you, to everyone. For Tolkien, the fate of the world is at stake, but there is a solution. The parallel here is clear. Tolkien just posed a different outcome rooted in hope. Because Tolkien was a lover of language, you can see his affinity for the runes of Old Norse because they are everywhere in Middle-earth. They're on swords, on doors, on tombs, and a variety of other objects. that feels unmistakably Norse, but with a bit of Tolkien elvish stylism mixed in. In the Viking world, runes are not decorative, they're operative. You can carve them and they do something, to bind, to curse, to protect. Runes are a power etched into matter, and Tolkien clearly knows this tradition. He fills Middle-earth with writing that carries weight, inscription that endures, weapons that remember, doors that respond, moon letters, runes which can be read only in the light of the moon. At first glance, this feels like a direct inheritance from the North, and it is. However, Tolkien's runes don't behave like Norse spells. They don't force reality. They reveal it. There's a clear example of this in the doors of Durin. They don't open with strength. They don't open with secret knowledge. They open when somebody finally understands what the words already say. Speak, friend, and enter. Aside from the mythical elements of Norse runes, Tolkien honors the past by saying, the truth was never hidden. The door to unlock the North and the language of the Viking Age was never locked by magic. The problem was perception. If you spend time learning a language, it will unlock doors for you didn't know existed, and you will see things that you can't through modern translation from Old Norse to modern English. The usage of runes in The Lord of the Rings is an invitation from Tolkien to you to step into his world, into his love of language, and to see what learning from ancient cultures, their language, and their customs will teach you. Let's put it this way. The truth is written, but you must be ready to see it. Meaning it's everywhere. It's simply not always visible, especially if you don't speak the same language. Tolkien doesn't reject the magic of the Norse runes, but rather shifts our attention to the magic that is in the language itself. So yes, the connection is clear. The connection is to the North. The connection is paying homage to the North and the language of the Old Norse. It's amazing. Now the next one, this is where people feel most confident saying, yes, this is definitely connected to the Viking Age. Trolls, giants, and creatures that feel ancient. Straight out of Norse folklore, right? Yes, definitely. All right. Norse lore definitely has trolls, a whole realm of giants, and even undead creatures that look human, but stronger, and definitely a little less attractive. So did Tolkien do a 1-for-1? In Tolkien's world, trolls were large, strong, slow-thinking, often violent, crude, and cruel. Vulnerable to the sunlight, they turn to stone. And in The Hobbit, you can see them. They speak poorly, they argue, they're tricked, and they also turn to stone when the sun comes out. In The Lord of the Rings, you see them in a cave. Trolls are used as shock troops by Sauron, which may have its roots in the Viking legend of the Troll Queen. And so yes, you can sense and you can see some of the parallels. We have an episode on trolls and mention the Troll Queen in that episode and another episode as well. She will get her own episode here in the future. And then we have the giants. What did Tolkien do with giants? Is he introduced them, but with a twist. They weren't central villains. Many times in Norse lore, they fight the gods. They feel, in Tolkien's world, more like a remnant of an older world, which is consistent with the North. They were, however, massive. They were destructive. The Hobbit shows them as stone giants throwing rocks in the mountains and references in Middle-earth. They treat them like past echoes. And that is also consistent because giants are always referred to as echoes of the past, from a different world, from a different realm. Tolkien never fully develops giant lore. And not many giants in Norse lore have a backstory either, unless that is someone uses artistic license and decides to create one, which may or may not be the case in one of our episodes on giants. My take is there is definitely close connection to the Norse tradition here, but if you have a differing opinion, make sure to share it in the comments. Orcs are not natural, but there's some sort of deranged being in human form. They are corrupted beings twisted by evil, and this is extremely consistent with the Viking Age version of a zombie, or in our case, an orc. Draugrs were once human, dead, but alive, but also corrupt. yet possessing extra strength and extremely formidable to face. Even the most skilled warriors had a challenge fighting them. While some might see orcs as one of Tolkien's strongest departures from Norse myth, I think there's a case to be made for one of the strongest. Tolkien may or may not have consciously written Norse lore into his books, but the influence was there. One could argue that there are other cultures that had similar crossovers that could have had a similar effect or influence. But you and I both know that the fascination with the Viking Age and Norse mythology is hard to shake. My conclusion is the roots are there, even if the branch twisted in a slightly different direction. Because once you start looking closely, you realize Tolkien, his universe, has rules. And his rules may have something in common with what the Vikings believed about the world they lived in, which then leads us to our next comparison, why both worlds feel heavy with destiny. But let's explore whether they are the same or if Tolkien is drawing from Norse lore or something else. Both worlds feel the weight of destiny, that's for sure. Characters walk as if something ancient is leading them forward, watching. This feels unmistakably Norse. See, the Viking world, fate has a name, weird. Not weird, but they sound similar. And weird is a concept of fate that's like solid iron. It's fixed and immovable. Oftentimes it's pictured as a thread already cut, woven and waiting for you at the end of the loom. You can't fight it. You can't curse it. You can meet it with courage, but you can't escape it. And that may answer the question as to why Norse heroes are so compelling. Their greatness lies in how they face the unavoidable. Now, Tolkien, he steps in and he says, yes, destiny exists in Middle-earth, but it doesn't crush a character's agency. It invites it and suggests that choices matter. Tolkien replaces iron fate with providence. Not a force, not a mechanism, a presence. Providence in Middle-earth is mysterious, often hidden, but it is also deeply personal. That's what makes the small acts matter. That's why mercy matters. Every decision has a consequence or benefits. They all matter. Frodo doesn't survive because fate demands it. He survives because earlier choices echoed forward. Bilbo's mercy, Gandalf's sacrifice, Sam's faithfulness. In Norse myth, events unfold because they must. In Tolkien's world, events unfold because someone chooses rightly even when it's hard. The end is written, yet choice matters. Providence, agency, walking side by side in a glorious mystery. Like parallel train tracks running side by side, looking to the horizon and the two meet, they become one. Norse lore and beliefs tend to side with one side of the tracks over the other and explain everything from the fate carved into stone or as woven into tapestry that they didn't make or choose for themselves but were destined to live no matter the choices they make. This may be the one area where Tolkien's influences are rooted in something other than Norse mythology. Norse lore tends to settle firmly on one side of the tracks, fate. Fate is carved, fate is woven. And it is set long before man ever lifts a sword. You don't choose the thread, you don't alter the pattern. At best, you decide how you meet what is already coming. That belief explains so much of the Viking world. Why honor matters more than outcome. While bravery exists even when victory is impossible. Why the sagas are filled with men who walk knowingly towards their end. And this may be the one place where Tolkien's influences lean most clearly away from the North. Not because he rejects destiny altogether, but because he refuses to believe that choice is an illusion. In Middle-earth, the future is heavy. It's not sealed. And that quiet shift away from carved stone towards meaningful choice, it sets the stage for something both worlds hold in common. Because once you ask whether choice matters, the next question becomes unavoidable. What do you do when it's hard? Which brings us to our final comparison, courage. At the heart of both worlds beats the same virtue, courage. The North admires it. Middle-earth is built on it. Both honor the one who stands when retreat would be easier. Both respect the person who acts despite fear. Both understand that courage is not the absence of dread, but movement into its presence. The difference is not whether courage exists. The difference is why it exists. In the Norse world, courage is defiance against the inevitable. You stand because the end is coming anyway. In Tolkien's world, courage is faithfulness in uncertainty. You stand because the outcome is not yet written, and that's where hope comes in. Because if courage only matters when doom is fixed, then it belongs only to heroes in the sagas. But if courage matters because choice still counts, then it belongs to you. Courage doesn't require certainty. It doesn't require strength. It doesn't even require confidence. It only requires the next step. And that means the same courage that carried hobbits across Middle-earth, the same courage that stood on bridges and at broken gates, it's still available here, now, for ordinary people facing ordinary darkness. Doing what is right, that is courage. And that is where these stories finally meet us. When we hear the word courage, we tend to imagine battlefields, swords raised, gates breaking, and the last stand against impossible odds. But for most people listening, that's not where courage is tested. Courage today often looks much quieter. It shows up in the mind before it ever shows up in our actions. If you're human, you deal with any number of things on a daily basis. Anxiety, panic, depression, all of them can flood a person with fear, dread, and a sense of overwhelming urgency that typically are out of proportion with the actual situation. But we feel them nonetheless. Our bodies react and our thoughts spiral. Our nervous system begins to sound alarms whether we realize what's happening or not. And the thing is there's nothing physical attacking you. This is all invisible. There's no dragon to point to. There's no enemy on the horizon. There's no clear reason for fear. There's only the internal weight of it that we carry. In the Norse world, courage means standing when death is inevitable. In Tolkien's world, courage often means continuing when fear is lying to you, and when a dragon is awakened from deep within a mountain, and now the whole world seems to be on fire. This matters because courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing to act without certainty. It's getting out of bed when your mind says you shouldn't. It's making the call. It's taking the walk. It's speaking the truth. It's asking for help, not because you feel strong, but because you refuse to let fear decide for you. That's why Tolkien's bravest characters aren't fearless. They are exhausted. They are afraid. They are outmatched, and they keep going. That kind of courage is not dramatic. It doesn't feel heroic. It rarely feels victorious in the moment, but it does change the story because there's always hope. If courage only belonged to warriors who laughed at death, most of us would be disqualified. But if courage belongs to those who take the next right step, even while their hands are shaking, then courage is still very much alive, still available, still possible, even now, especially now. Tolkien in his writing never wanted the readers to feel like they were somehow being instructed in any religious sense, but he wanted them to feel like they were remembering something that resonates on a deeply human level, something that feels like it's always been true, a story that they've heard many times in different ways. He believed the old myths of the North were not lies, that they were pointing to some original truth, a truth that humanity has always been telling from the beginning of time. He would say that the North had fragments, and we know and we enjoy Norse lore deeply. He could see the refractions, he could feel the connections, and that's why we can feel them too. The Viking world sensed things deeply. They sensed that sacrifice mattered, that honor cost something real, that the universe was a battlefield, not a playground, that the world itself felt tired, wounded, dying. They weren't naive. Their sacrifices were brave. Their kings were mighty. Their victories were impressive. Tolkien doesn't mock any of that, even if his views were rooted in something different. He learned how to honor the stories, highlight the truths they told, and use such an amazing world of lore as a springboard and a backdrop for creating his own world. Here's the subtle genius of what Tolkien does. He never tells you this is the true story. That is for you to explore, to consider, to be honest, and to ask questions and to keep an open mind. What we've done today is highlight Tolkien's love of Norse lore and his nod to what is fun and beautiful and true about the stories of the North. And I believe that Tolkien honored the Norse stories of old, much like we attempt to do with each episode. Tolkien loved language and culture and was a student of many things: Norse, Celtic, Christian, humanity. And so it's no surprise that we see echoes from each. The Viking world taught Tolkien many things. Now it's your turn to rewatch the movies or reread the books and look for Norse influence, those allusions and the homage that Tolkien pays to the North. Before we close the book on this journey between Valhalla and Rivendell, let's lock in the biggest connections that we explored today. The ring, without a doubt, is one of the clearest. Tolkien doesn't just echo Andvari's ring, he takes it to the next level. The creatures, they're another connection that to me is the most fascinating. Trolls, giants, orcs, they feel Viking because Tolkien leans into what the sagas do best, giving us creatures for imagination that present challenges to our heroes and life lessons for us to uncover. Tolkien truly knew the North. He didn't just study Norse mythology, he translated and taught Old Norse and Old English at Oxford University. He read the Poetic Edda in its original language. These stories that didn't inspire him from a distance, they inspired him from within. Now, just because this episode is ending doesn't mean the conversation has to. I would love to hear what you have caught as you've watched and read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. What moments felt unmistakably Norse to you? What connections stood out to you that we didn't cover today? Share them in the comments. I am genuinely looking forward to reading them. And you make up an amazing, engaged community. Thank you for being part of it. Here's the takeaway that I hope you carry with you. See the beauty in cultures, in language, in people, what they believe, just the way Tolkien did. Be genuinely curious. Listen, learn long enough to understand what they are reaching for and what truths they hold, maybe even if it's just in part. But that kind of curiosity doesn't just make better stories, it makes wiser people. So now it is time to dust off the DVDs or just Google which streaming platform to watch on and re-watch Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, or reread your favorite chapter in your favorite book. The North is there, but will you catch it? Until next time, be bold, be strong, and awaken the Viking in you.